Hello, I'm Michelle Gethers Clark, and I serve as Visa's Chief Diversity Officer and Head of Corporate Responsibility. On behalf of my entire team of Inclusive Impact and Sustainability, we welcome all of you to Financial Education and Strategic Dialogue. We're really pleased that you've taken time out of your busy day to join this conversation. We truly believe that this conversation is in support of our purpose to uplift everyone, everywhere. Visa's network actually connects people around the world, and we provide a unique opportunity for equitable access to financial services. And the reality is there are trillions of transactions, so that means trillions of opportunities to uplift everyone, everywhere, and improve lives. We are working to increase everyone's access to the global economy, regardless of who you are, where you live, and what you know. With our partners and clients, the Inclusive Impact and Sustainability team tries and strives to build a purpose-driven partnership. And we do this by making sure that we're focused on offerings related to our environment, society, and business. You see, every day we focus on the idea that we share humanity, we share communities, we share the planet, and we share a purpose. We have 4 desired outcomes in our work every day. And one is we want to increase diverse talent in an inclusive culture. Also, we want to promote digital financial equity and inclusion for small businesses, individuals, and households. Also, we want to drive sustainable commerce and the transition to a low carbon economy. And fourth, and certainly not least, we want to strengthen communities in which we live and work. And we want to do that through employee engagement as well as our Visa Foundation and our philanthropic efforts. April 29th is Financial Literacy Day in the United States and in many other parts of the world. Today, we are looking forward to using the breadth of Visa's network to reconnect to partners, policyholders, practitioners in financial education and financial inclusion. We want to share our work. We want to champion the cause of financial education. And we want to listen to other voices in this space and in other spaces so that we can gather insight and we can have this exchange and dialogue. The speakers participating in today's dialogue come from all over the globe and will examine ways that stakeholders can take action. You see, we just don't want to be talking about it. We want to be doing something about it. During today's session, we invite you to share your questions, and we want them to be actionable solutions or just inquiry. You see, if we work together, we can address issues of access, literacy, and equity. So we welcome all who are passionate around the globe to join in this conversation of financial education. Thank you for participating. Be well.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for the warm welcome, Michelle. And thank you all for taking time out of your incredibly busy days on this Friday to join us in this conversation. My name is Beth Hurwitz. I'm the Global Head of Social Impact at Visa, and I'm the moderator for this event today. I'm pleased to be here today with our panelists who come from a range of sectors, but who all pursue the common aim of promoting financial inclusion. We're here to discuss how to leverage financial education as a driver towards digital financial inclusion, as well as how cross-section partnerships can harness digitization and other means to shape equitable financial access. We welcome your interaction in this webinar. During the session, you'll be able to submit questions for consideration in the Q&A session. Please type your questions in the chat panel on the right hand of your screen. And that's probably looking left for you, but the right hand of your screen. Also, there'll be a poll on the right hand of your screen, and we really value your feedback and would love to hear your thoughts. So after this live stream, please, the session itself will be available on the social impact page on visa.com and the Practical Money Skills YouTube channel. And with that, let's begin. So I'm going to very briefly introduce our esteemed panel. First, we have Dorothea Arndt, who is CEO of Hand in Hand International. Hi, Dorothea.
Hello.
Next, we have Carmen Correa, CEO of ProMujer.
Hello, Beth.
Next, we have Nan Morrison, who is CEO of Council for Economic Education. Good morning, Nan.
Hi, Beth.
And then we have Elfid Torres, CEO of Fundes. Good morning, Elfid.
Hi, Beth. Morning.
Last, we have Joanna Erdman, who is having a bit of technical difficulty right now. So we're hoping, oh, Joanna, you're here. Fantastic.
I'm here. Thank you for the invitation.
Next, we have Joanna Erdman, who's Vice President of the Cashless Foundation. Thank you. Thank you, Joanna, for joining us. Okay, so let's get started. What I'm going to do is the first question is actually going to be the same question for all of our panelists. And what I'd love to be able to do is ask the panelists when I call on them to do a little bit of more introduction about themselves, tell us about themselves, and answer the question. And the question is, what are the biggest opportunities to advance financial literacy and equitable digital financial inclusion for everyone, everywhere? Okay. Carmen, why don't we start with you?
Yes, of course. Happy to do so. My name is Carmen Correa, as you introduced me, Beth. I'm the CEO of ProMujer. And ProMujer actually is a social enterprise that for more than 30 years has been working and impacting the life of women in Latin America with an integrated methodology offering underserved women access to financial services, health, and skilling. Responding to your question, basically, what are those biggest opportunities? A common challenge in Latin American countries is the need to increase the financial inclusion of the population at large. For instance, worldwide, 69% of adults, they have a bank account, but in Latin America, only 51% of all adults have a bank account, according to Deloitte. So, especially when you talk about women and when you talk about women financial inclusion and gender equality in the region, we at ProMujer, we can confirm that women face more gaps in access to services and also financial education. One of the biggest challenges we face when discussing and women's financial inclusion in Latin America is the lack of data, disaggregated data by gender. However, several studies maintain that in the region, only 49% of women have a bank account. Only 11% of women, they have savings accounts, and only 10% of women, they have access to financial services. So this gap widens up in terms of access to financial services in women that led small and medium companies. So despite women own 50% of those micro and small, medium companies, only about 70% of those women, they don't have access to the needed capital to actually develop their businesses. So the financial inclusion gap goes hand in hand with the gap on financial education among women. There is concrete evidence actually that can show us that women are less confident and more risk adverse in what it has to do to financial matters. They are less likely to save through actually financial products that are actively and more likely to save through informal financial products. They show also women more difficulties inadequately choose the best financial products and best financial services for their needs to cover those needs they have. And also they accumulate less than men in what it has to do to wealth. So in conclusion, despite women, we are agents of change because we are really agents of change. We don't have access mostly to these financial products, services, and also financial education that is needed to develop and that is needed to be included in the economy. So there is a huge opportunity in Latin America based on data. We estimate that if we can include women in what it has to do to financial services, if we can give women the access to the needed financial services, we will have a huge impact in the GDP of the region. We know that we will have a huge opportunity also to bring in capital to cover those needs that are not covered today for women. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Carmen. Absolutely. That gap from a gender perspective is definitely something that we're seeing in many places around the world. Why don't we move over to Joanna? Joanna, are you with us?
Yes, I am here. Thank you once again. And our Cashless Foundation is taking care of the micro companies and entrepreneurs that are going to move from the traditional businesses to e-commerce, or traditional business to cashless, paperless commerce. And this is a way, and most of the small companies are individual people that have a lot of challenges on everyday business, and they have very limited time to spend it on education. And we believe that we can deliver some universal tools for them to educate themselves, because they usually do not use courses, do not participate in general trainings. They are rather self-confident to gather the knowledge by themselves. And this is a common situation that they share the knowledge with their cooperators, with some partners. So the Cashless Poland Foundation is delivering a platform that is called Academy of Entrepreneurship. And we believe that we can transfer the traditional companies to e-commerce, and this is the challenge that was very significantly visible during the pandemic, COVID-19, and most of the business were not ready for such a migration, for such a change. And the other opportunity that we can see, because Carmen mentioned that in Latin America there is a lot of population unbanked. If we take a look at Poland, we can show that around 80% of the society is banked people. However, we still have groups that are underbanked or unbanked at all, and this is around 80% of the society. And when the economy is moving to a cashless, contactless society, because we have also 100% cashless, contactless acceptance on the Polish market, we are going paperless, which means that we are discourage people to come to companies and to come to other places for formal interactions. It means that, for example, seniors are excluded from this part of society that is on this level, and we are trying to taking care also of this part that is digitally excluded.
Fantastic. Thank you, Joanna. I appreciate that. Why don't we move over to Dorothea?
Yes, hello, Beth. I'm Dorothea. I represent Hand in Hand. We're an NGO that has trained 3.5 million women micro entrepreneurs. I want to come back to something that Carmen mentioned. She talked about the size of the opportunity that women represent, and I see that also. And I also maybe want to add that a big opportunity we see at Hand in Hand is also, in general, the poor and farmers. And I want to talk a little bit about why we see that it's a huge opportunity from a macroeconomic point of view to address the financial inclusion and education needs of those groups. And that's because those groups, if they're faced with a financial emergency, it's not just a higher personal risks for them, but it is also greater cost to the economy at large. And that's because those groups are more likely to revert to so-called negative coping mechanisms. And what I mean by that is, for example, the women who we serve at Hand in Hand, if a woman encounters, for example, an unexpected hospital bill, what will happen is that either she has to withhold a child from school, or she has to take profit out of her business and not reinvest it, or she has to sell a productive asset like a goat. And all of these mechanisms, of course, if they multiply, they are a big cost to the productive capacity in the economy as a whole. And what one might ask then is, if this is such a huge opportunity, and so far there's 3 people on this panel who are agreeing it is, why don't we see those groups being more widely addressed in financial education and inclusion? And I believe that is because from a business perspective, designing products for poor or for women or for farmers is counterintuitive, because most of the decision makers in those organizations are men, and they might come from a wealthy background, and they're probably living in an urban environment. So designing for these groups is in a sense counterintuitive, and that's where I believe it's so important for fintechs or banks or financial service providers to partner up with NGOs such as Hand in Hand, who have an in-depth understanding of these groups. So we've been training 3.5 million grassroots women entrepreneurs in over nigh on 20 years in 10 countries. And I believe we can really help with understanding those groups and designing products for them that work for them. And finally, I see another opportunity here. We've talked about the unbanked, and I think in using that term, we need to be careful not to regard individuals as unbanked just because perhaps they're not using entirely formal banking mechanisms. So if I think about sub-Saharan Africa in particular, we have 20 million active savers who are using savings groups. And that's 4 million more than the number of customers of the largest bank on the continent, Standard Bank. So it would be great to see digital inclusion and education also building on those semi-formal platforms that exist already.
Fantastic. And I agree with you, absolutely. Why don't we move to Dorothea? Oh, sorry, Dorothea. Why don't we move to Nan?
Thanks, Beth. I'm the president and CEO of the Council for Economic Education, and our mission is to equip K-12 students with the tools and knowledge of personal finance and economics so they can make better decisions for themselves, their families, and their communities. So not surprisingly, I believe that one of the best ways to advance financial literacy is to start young and teach it in schools. Why start young? Well, when you start young, you teach good habits from the get-go, and you teach kids the language of money. And it's just that, another language. So starting to introduce the kids to the basic words and concepts makes sense. We teach kids about compound interest using jelly beans. And hopefully when they get to their first retirement plan, they will remember that very sweet lesson. Starting kids early also puts them on a path to best manage their finances through their lives, to make the choices and trade-offs that can help them to reach the goals they have for themselves, no matter what they are. equitable access is also a key reason to bring financial education to schools. As C notes in our biennial survey of the states, we just released one a couple of weeks ago, sadly, only 24 states, not even half, require a class for students to graduate from high school. This is really shortchanging over half the kids in the country. Here are a few bits of data. In a state without a requirement, there is a 16-point gap in access to financial education between wealthy and lower income school districts. 16 points. A recent study by my colleague, Dr. Anna Maria Lusardi, found that a little more than half of white and Asian American adults could answer some basic personal finance questions correctly, but only a little over a third of Black and Hispanic adults could answer them correctly. So you see, we see the gaps in adults. In addition, there's a gap across the genders, and Carmen talked about that a little bit. So schools can really help here. They can really be part of a broad intentional approach to move the equity needle forward for everyone. So why are schools so important? Well, money is not always a topic that's discussed at home for a variety of reasons. Some of it's cultural. Sometimes a parent doesn't know. They may be new to the finance system in the country in which they live. They may have identity fears about being part of an established banking system. That established banking system may not reach them. Dorothea was just alluding to that in her last remarks as well. They also might be afraid that it can create fear or shame for their kids. So bringing this education to schools thoughtfully and respectfully can definitely help. Of course, the curriculum needs to be relevant and inclusive. And we're very pleased to have partnered with quite a number of industry colleagues here in the US to create an updated unified set of standards for personal finance education. And they were equity reviewed to make sure they were inclusive and relevant. They cover 6 basic concepts: savings and investing, earning, spending, risk, and credit. I think those concepts are pretty universal. And they allow for advances in technology. For example, we have some lessons in risk for little kids around passwords. Goldilocks and the 3 passwords actually is the lesson. So these, by developing tools to help kids learn about this against these standards, I think we can take a big step up in helping children to understand the basics and to help them, in some cases, even bring it home to their families.
I love that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nan. I love that. Alfred.
Hi, thank you. Yeah, well, I would really like to, your questions about biggest opportunities. Well, of course, I will talk about from the perspective of Fundes, which is this organization in Latin America that works since 40 years now, strengthening the capacities of small firms in the region to, of course, to thrive in these turbulent regions in terms of economic, political, social environments. And of course, in the last 4 years, we have focused in strengthening those skills through education and training and consultancy services. And of course, financial literacy it has been all the time a very, very important topic to do that. So thinking about in terms of which is now the biggest opportunities that we face in terms of advancing financial literacy and equitable digital financial inclusion, I would say that I don't want to be obvious in my answer, but I will mention technology and digitalization, and in the region, particularly in Latin America, in the last decade, internet access and smartphone penetration has continued growing, and it now reached populations that at some point were not covered. And why I'm telling technology is an opportunity, because in the past, and of course we have heard previously, a lot of the challenges that we face in different segments and populations of micro enterprises or gender population, segments for age or well, different categories that we have here, and a lot of challenges that we face now and we have faced for so many years. But in the past, what we were used to that programs of financial literacy were, this place where you gather a number of micro enterprises or people that you would like to provide them with knowledge about financial literacy. And these programs used to finish at some time. They just cover a limited number of participants, of beneficiaries, because of time issues, or because it's costly to continue this permanently. And I think that the opportunity lies exactly there. Now, with technology and access to connectivity, now you have, for the first time, probably, the opportunity that these programs are not, something that will finish at some point in time. Now, we have the opportunities that create platforms that put in a one single place all the knowledge that we have accumulated in so many years, to put it freely to access to the users. And the opportunity is that for so long we have been working these sort of programs hand in hand with large corporations that have an interest, a social or a business interest in the communities of micro and small firms in the region, because they are their business partners, because are distributors or suppliers, or they are clients or communities around them. And for so long they have pushed and make a lot of efforts to help them in financial education. But now they can create communities, permanent communities, that will last hopefully forever, that will permanently improve the way they serve them. And from my point of view, that is like the most important opportunity that we are facing now, thanks to the availability of technology and connectivity. Thank you, Beth.
Fantastic. Thank you, Alfred. So it's interesting. We heard a lot about, an unbanked gap based on gender, based on race, wealth, age. We heard a bit about lack of sort of tools, education, products that are tailored to these key excluded communities. We also, Alfred brought up, access to technology and, how we have to fix that issue. And then also sort of a focus on both formal and informal economy, that not everything is around the formal economy. We heard about opportunities or thoughts around starting young, and the schools can help, and using technology and data innovations to help. I'd like to actually now go a little bit deeper into some of these topics. And I'm going to go back to Alfred. I'm going to put you back on the hot seat. Alfred, while many will agree financial skills are critical to being sort of fully participating member of 21st century economies, experience also shows how hard it can be to do financial education effectively at scale. What are the key lessons learned that should be front of mind for organizations designing and delivering financial education?
Yeah, well, thank you. It's very, very important questions. I will summarize, the key lessons in, probably four topics. One is it is very important that, well, I already mentioned, I'm already thinking in terms of, we are doing this in terms of technology, not anymore in the analog world, but now in using platforms. We have an experience with our platform ENCO, that it's an e-learning platform where we provide financial education. But there are four key lessons that we would like to stress. One is understanding the segment. We don't believe that, that you can, talking about financial literacy, it's not one size fits all solutions. So in our case, we have a lot of experience of micro enterprises, these traditional micro entrepreneurs that are in Latin America. And it's very important that you design the programs, the contents based on their needs. And it's very important that you understand the segment. Otherwise, the risk is that you try to cover the problems of other segments. And it's very important: age, gender, the family environment, the business size, the industry sectors. And that's probably the most important one. The second one is that you should all the time keep in mind that, why are you doing this? Of course, you have the segment, but financial constraints and inclusion, it's very broad. So what exactly you would like to do with this literacy? And it is very important because you have to provide quick wins. Otherwise, you will lose interest in the participants. So financial literacy is a component of business competitiveness in this micro world sector. So they probably are facing poor business management skills and practices. They don't know how to get working capital. They don't know how to get access to financial services. So it is very important that the components that you use in financial literacy are linked to this what for and what you really are trying to look and try to get and deliver quick wins to them, so they really can see firsthand that the information that they are receiving, it's useful. The third one is, I would say it's learning by doing and connecting. It is very important that all the things that you teach and train and advise, it's linked to something specifically. So for example, it's likely that you will need working capital or investment or loans. But if you just provide like the information on how to use a loan, but don't connect with the actually providing the service, well, it's very likely that it will just remain as information. So it's very important that you also try to link this with the provision of financial services. So as long as you do financial literacy, you are also doing connected with the market. And the last one I will say is, well, continue improvement in terms of content and functions, because I am as I said, I'm thinking in terms of platforms and not anymore on face-to-face programs that, of course, you can improve content, but functions and connectivity with the market, it's also a very, very important point. So summarizing, the fourth point is understanding the segment and knowing exactly what you are doing this for, learning by doing and connecting, and continue improvement in terms of content and functions.
Excellent. Thank you, Alfred. All four very, very good lessons. Let's move over to Carmen. Carmen, what are the best means of delivering financial education? Does this differ by region, by demography? Is there a hierarchy of skills? What makes the biggest difference to livelihoods today?
Yes, thank you, Beth. And yes, they differ by region. And also, as Elfrid was mentioning, it differs also by segment. We need to, first, it is important to point out that it's most of the excluded population has little to no financial education, as Nan also was mentioning before. So that is not only in Latin America, that happens worldwide. So the excluded population actually is the one that has less access to this financial education. Therefore, rather than trusting that financial education will be disseminated by word of mouth, like other type of information, we really need to be responsible of guaranteeing that sufficient valuable information is available to the bulk, to the whole population. So, for example, in Latin America, we have a very particular reality. When you talk about Latin America, everybody thinks Latin America is similar. We differ country by country. We have totally different countries, different cultures. We all speak Spanish, or almost all of us speak Spanish beyond Brazil. But the thing is that we have a huge indigenous population. We have tons of different languages, even in one country. So we have, for example, around 15% of the population in Latin America, it's indigenous population. So those populations are the ones that mainly don't have access to this financial education. And beyond having access to these financial services and education, we have to guarantee that those services do not compromise their own identity. In what it has to do to gender, the data that I already shared with you before, that shows you how the gaps we have in between women and men. We need to standardize financial education programs, guaranteeing that, of course, those programs and that financial education, it's not only men referred. So we cannot actually give the same education to everybody. We have to guarantee that the education, the financial education we are providing, has the necessary tone and has actually been adapted for the population you want to reach. According to a perception survey conducted by OECD in 23 governments around the world, there are different subgroups of women that financial education programs could target. For example, low-income women, unbanked women, immigrant women, women belonging to ethnic minorities, female workers. These are totally different groups with different needs, with different type of education and actually levels of education. So you will need to adapt the program so everybody can actually get access to the needed information, because we come from different backgrounds, we have different needs, and we need to know that, and we need to be very well aware of that differences. So, for example, for financial education programs among young women, we should focus probably in money management or personal financial topics, and we could be looking into more digital financial education. When we talk about older women or women of older ages, programs should focus probably in financial planning or even expenses control or even avoid over-indebtedness. When we talk about low-income women and marginalized women, we should focus on basic savings. We could also focus on what it has to do to debt, investing, and financial management. When we talk to women entrepreneurs, maybe we should be focusing on gathering the right information for the resources they need, gaining confidence in financial matters, gaining confidence also in what they have to acquire as a knowledge for certain services and rights. Technology and digital also education play a key role, as Selfie also was stating. Technology can also allow us to give access to more financial educations to women in rural areas, women that they don't have access today to their regular education. In Latin America, for example, technology and digital tools play also a fundamental role in what it has to do to financial education. For example, today we have all in Latin America, many people are using Mercado Pago, Trend City, so digital wallets, accounts, digital financial education will be key to access these type of platforms, these type of tools that are available for the whole population. So in ProMujer, we are concentrating our effort in giving women all the needed financial education so they can use and better use the financial services we provide, the funds we provide them, but also how to improve their financial inclusion among the whole society. We have also developed a platform, Emprende ProMujer, through which we are giving women access to all the needed financial tools and resources to use and have access to this financial education they need for the development of their companies. So basically, what I think is we should use a multi-channel financial education to actually reach all women in the region and the needs of all these diverse women groups. And that is what we are looking forward to. Through ProMujer and through also partnerships we are trying to set with other organizations that can actually guarantee with us the financial inclusions of women in Latin America. Thank you, Beth.
No, thank you, Carmen. I appreciate it. Both you and Alfred are definitely focused on, sort of customizing what's necessary to different segment needs and using technology innovation, which I think is great. Let's move on to Dorothea. Dorothea, adopting new ways to start, manage, and grow a business is often harder for women, small and micro business owners due to gender gaps in digital access, finance, connections, and business skills, as well as social norms constraining women's aspirations and confidence. How should we design financial education programs with these gender-related challenges in mind?
Yes, Beth. I'd love to answer that question by referencing the partnership we had together with Visa in Greater Nairobi in Kenya. And that partnership is just coming to an end now in summer. And it was a highly successful partnership to train 10,500 women micro-entrepreneurs in financial skills as well as entrepreneurship skills. And I was really enjoying Alfred's point about the fact that financial education has to be linked to something, to a benefit. And I think that's why this project was so successful, because what we saw is that the women micro-entrepreneurs in the program were able to increase their profitability by 46 percentage points. And that's 46 percentage points against the backdrop of the pandemic. And what we also know is that they told us that the top benefit for them from this program was the financial education element. So 38% of them told us that this was their preferred part of the program. And we also know that the reason why they preferred that part of the program is that is the element that allowed them, it was the financial training that allowed them to improve their cost control. And it's the cost control that then led to improved profitability. I really enjoyed Alfred's point there about the benefit of financial inclusion that has to be seen. In terms of how to adapt programs to women, I could say a lot about this, and I only have 2 minutes, so I will confine myself to one point, and perhaps we can follow up in the Q&A, or if anyone wants to reach out to me on LinkedIn, I'm happy to sort of share further actionable insights that way. But so to focus on the one recommendation that we would have, it's that it's really important to involve men in programs targeted at women. And that's because it's really important for community acceptance and to avoid backlash. Because as I think Carmen told us, access to finance and financial literacy more generally for women is very much dictated by gender norms. And so, for example, in Kenya, where we were running this program, there is this notion that if women take out a loan and that loan is guaranteed by collateral, that collateral more often than not is owned by her male partner, by her husband. And so there's this fear around women taking out a loan, not keeping up repayments, and then loan officers taking away the livestock or the household items owned by the husband. And so that would be the top recommendation I would have around male engagement in programs targeted at women.
I love that. I think that's fantastic. I also really enjoyed that you made the point that it's also very important in all of these programs and in everything that we're doing in financial education and financial empowerment to measure the impact. And you started with those great numbers from a measurement of an impact. What did it do to the livelihood? What did it do to the well-being of these women? And I very much enjoyed that. Thank you.
Exactly. Yes.
Okay, we're going to move on to Joanna. Joanna, The World Economic Forum estimates 70% of new value created in the economy over the next decade will be based on digitally enabled business models. What role does that financial education play in accelerating an inclusive digital economy?
Oh, thank you for this question. And I think it is crucial, especially that bringing new economy, bringing digital to our everyday life means that we have faced new challenges. It was mentioned here that technology is an opportunity, and I believe so. And at the same time, technology brings some challenges like cybersecurity, new ways of doing things, supporting mobile skills and digital skills. And this kind of solution also need to be implemented responsibly. So we believe that together with the solutions that we promote as a cashless foundation, we should deliver extra knowledge, extra education to the people that are going to use this solution. For example, if we are going to move from traditional economy to digital economy, we can limit shadow economy that is somehow connected with using cash on a regular basis. But we can observe that some people that are not digitally educated can be afraid of using new technology, using new devices. If we, for example, implement SoftPOS, which is an application terminal on a mobile phone, and somebody is encouraging to pay you a different way that you used to do it on a regular basis, you may be afraid, you need to know more about it. So in Poland, I believe that within next 3 years, every company should be ready for the e-commerce somehow, at least have a digital part and a traditional part. So it means that not only entrepreneurs should be ready for the digital skills, which is a little bit different story from the traditional business that they are currently doing, but also the consumers needs to be ready, needs to be prepared for these new solutions. And finally, we are cooperating together with banks, with the acquirers on the Polish market, with Visa and MasterCard, and also with the public sector, which is going to move to digital also. So we would like to create an ecosystem that finally would be smart from the customer's perspective, which means will be valuable, will be appreciated, will not be a barrier or a challenge for the customers that we are working for, and deliver the new solutions, the new technologies, the new opportunities.
That's great. Thank you, Joanna. And I really appreciate that you brought up the whole idea of trust and the whole idea that, in this new world from a digitization perspective, that, people are nervous, they're
Yes.
worried. And, and one of the ways that you help build confidence is through knowledge. And that's what financial education and digital education is all about. So I appreciate that. Thank you, Joanna.
That's correct. Thank you.
Let's move to Nan. So Nan, how do we think about the role of different sectors in building sustained, ongoing digital and financial skills? What's the responsibility of providers, private companies, and governments specific to education and skill building?
Well, speaking as a not-for-profit executive, I of course think that the private sector can do an awful lot here. The first thing that they can do is help to provide more professional development for teachers. Research shows time and time and again that well-trained teachers who are confident and competent to teach this material can make a giant difference in how kids learn. Private sector companies should also be providing this training for their staff, which has multiple benefits, especially those new people to their company. Research also shows that if you ask people to opt out of their retirement plans and opt them in automatically, that they stay in those plans. And that helps to start building wealth, especially for people from communities who may not be familiar with these plans. So it's an opportunity to provide education and to do some good. I would also suggest that all employers provide digital means to provide payments to their employees. The worst case scenario is to have unbanked employees getting paychecks and using very expensive services to cash those paychecks. And that still happens and is quite prevalent in many sectors. Once you're working with your employees, it's really great to reach out to schools in the areas and do family nights. All of the data that we have says that it really opens up the dialogue between parents and their kids, and it makes the schools more likely to want to include financial education as part of their practices. For not-for-profits, call for help to us and to many other organizations that provide financial education integrated into your programs. We're happy to train the educators. Everybody can volunteer in various programs around financial education. I have to make a plug for one of ours called Invest in Girls, because we've been talking so much about the gap in financial education for women, the lack of access to financial services for women, et cetera. Our Invest in Girls program not only provides financial education to girls from low and moderate income areas, girls of color, but it helps them to be introduced to careers in finance and financial services. And that is a really big deal because that is a path to economic mobility and stability. Every company has a finance function. Every organization has one. Most importantly, everyone from the private sector, the public sector, can work together to advocate to get more and better financial education in the schools. We're so proud to be partnering with you, Beth, and your team at Visa on FinEd 50 to ensure that every student in the U.S. has access to high-quality financial education.
We are also very, very happy to be partnering with you on that. Also very exciting in the United States to get education into the schools and make it mandatory so that we can, as you said and as others have said, start young and change the trajectory of these people's lives. So really appreciate that. I also appreciate that call for help. Everybody on this panel and many of you in the audience have tools and ability to help each other. You know, we have, just as you said, we have an employee toolkit that you can take financial education out to your communities, and we're willing to share it with anybody. So the idea of asking for help and the idea for us to share and do everything we can so that all boats rise is a wonderful thought. Thank you very much. Okay, I think we're at the point. Thank you very much to all of our panelists to do Q&A. So hopefully you guys have been putting a bunch of questions in the chat, and I'm hoping that someone's going to put it into my chat over here so that we can pick up one or two of the key questions that are out there. Any questions? Okay. Right. First question is, there's evidence that financial education is most effective when received at a young age. With that in mind, how would you advise the Minister of Education or the Minister of Youth in reimagining the curriculum and thinking through how to make this the best it can be? Nan, let me start with you, since I know that you've done a lot of work in this area.
Thanks for the question. The first thing I would do is start with the financial literacy standards for K through 12. They talk about what kids should know, and they're kind of agnostic about the banking system or the process for transacting. So that makes it really flexible to really, they were developed here, but I think they're probably relevant and useful everywhere. There's also a lot of good curriculum out there. So you might take a look at that and see if it's culturally relevant for you and where you are, and leverage that as a start. And the most important thing, I think, is to have a concerted, organized effort to train teachers, because they form the army of wonderful people that can go out and get this education into the schools in a thoughtful way. And while we love volunteers for our programs, there's nothing like a well-trained educator to really teach it well, teach any subject well in the schools.
Thank you. Instead of calling on anyone, is any of the other panelists like to answer that question, or we can move on to the next one? Okay. One more question, I think then we will be, oh, Dorothea, why don't you answer that one?
No, actually, I was just saying I'm happy to move on to the next question. Sorry.
Got it. Okay, so here's the next question. After what we have heard and learned today on the important role financial education plays, what will you say to those who believe that financial education does not work? Dorothea, you want to try that one?
Oh, yes, absolutely. I guess I would revert back to the example that I made earlier. I think against the backdrop of a pandemic, to have been able to, for individuals who have no formal education, who typically have just a primary school education, for those individuals to have been able to improve their profitability by 45% points, I would defy anyone to be able to achieve that without the benefit of a financial education. And financial education doesn't have to, I know it sounds rather daunting, it doesn't have to be a very long program. In our case, we're talking about fortnightly sessions over a period of 8 to 9 months. So that's not a big time investment, I think. So that will be my answer to that one. And I think the other point I would make is there's a difference between, let's not make the mistake that, the poor or the unbanked are financially, let's say, unskilled or unsophisticated. I think our economics Nobel Prize, Esther Duflo, she uses an expression, she talks about barefoot hedge fund managers. And I love that expression because it shows that actually, even though you might be poor and illiterate, you're having to already to make some very sophisticated financial decisions every day. You have to decide when to save, when to spend, who to lend to, who to borrow from, etc. So it's not about being financially unsophisticated. It's just about having the knowledge to be able to make those decisions better.
Fantastic. Thank you. Alpha, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I would definitely. What I would say to those that don't believe is that, well, there are evidence everywhere, and I'm sure every one of us has their own evidence, but small firms that participated in financial literacy programs, they increased revenue. We have measured that 17% of increase in revenue compared with those that don't participate. And other thing that I would add is that, as I mentioned, the more components that you add to the program, the better the impact. And if you just provide financial literacy as an information, it works. But if you add, a component to connect it with something specific, it will create more impact. And if you add and connect them with the financial services, well, of course, the impact is it can just continue improving. So I think there is very nice evidence and cases that we will love to share because we are true believers of that this works.
Fantastic. Carmen, you want to add very briefly to this?
Yes, just one comment. We cannot achieve economic autonomy if we don't have financial education. So it is key. The financial education is something that we need to include, and it's something that will really change the economic autonomy of people, women, and everybody, actually. So we should include it in the curriculum, and it should be included from a very early stage.
Thank you, Carmen. It's a wonderful thought to end on. So I really very much appreciate it. Thank you, everyone. It's been a fantastic discussion. I want to thank all of our panelists for the conversation and our viewers for your participation. Really important. Recordings of this session will be available at visa.com for viewers. And viewers will receive an email with shareable links to provide to your colleagues and friends. With that, we'll end with an introductory video to Visa's Practical Money Skills Project, which is a rich resource of education content aimed at a global audience. And if Practical Money Skills sounds like a tool that you're interested in for viewers or panelists, if you want to leverage that, please get in touch with us at financialeducation@visa.com. Again, very much thank you and appreciate your time on this Friday. Have a wonderful Friday and a restful weekend, and I really thank you. Take care.